Hi, my name is Angela Romero, and this is Group 5, and our presentation is called Japan and the US in the New Millennium. This is our thesis. Terrorism, China, and Japanese popular culture were the catalysts that affected US-Japan relations the most in the first decade of the new millennium. The attacks on 9/11 and Japan's deployment of defense forces for the first time since World War II had the country taking a second look at Article 9 of its constitution. The rise of China as an economic power and US point of focus left Japan feeling insecure about its relationship with the American government. The extreme popularity of Japanese pop culture, however, resulted in a soft power so intense and enduring it more than made up for any perceived loss in hard power.
This is Sam O'Connor presenting September 11th. September 11th, 2001, the Japanese 9/11 dilemma, King Ghidorah's song 9/11. Next slide. The Japanese 9/11 dilemma. The attacks on September 11th, 2001 represented a challenge to the Japanese foreign policy that went back to 1945. 12 Japanese nationals died in the attacks, and while memorials were held, questions on how to respond lingered. The Japanese had gone to great lengths not to become a military power since the end of World War II, but were now being called to help. The Japanese assistance in the Afghan campaign and the Iraq reconstruction set a new precedent on how the Japanese self-defense forces would be used in upcoming conflicts. Koji Yanasawa, a former chief of the National Institute for Defense Studies, openly states now that Japanese involvement in the post-9/11 war on terror was a mistake. King Ghidorah's song 9/11. King Ghidorah was a Japanese hip-hop group in the mid-90s to early 2000s. This group comprised of 3 members who were all Japanese but spent extended time in America growing up. One of their most famous songs, entitled 9/11, was released exactly 1 year after the attacks. The song sympathizes with the city of New York and its citizens, while also being highly critical of the Japanese and American responses to the attacks. The group links the attacks to the atomic bombs dropped on Japan in the previous century and calls for non-violent responses to help resolve the root of the problem instead of continuing the cycle of violence. Quotes from King Ghidorah's 9/11. Rest in peace to NYC. The media's strategy is to push good and evil, and all I see is an atomic bomb that fell in the past. But the president not even trying to negotiate. Retaliation for retaliations for retaliation will never bring happiness. More than who, where, what, we need to ask why.
My name is Haley, and I will be presenting Japan's Lost Decade. In the 1930s, Japan was known for being an economic powerhouse as it produced the world's second largest gross national product, also known as GNP, after the United States. But this all came to a halt when Japan's economy stalled, resulting in one of the most longest-running economic crises in financial history. Japan's lost decade got its name due to the 10-year loss of economic growth. The main cause of this was due to the raise of interest rates, resulting in a liquidity trap. The stall not only resulted in a decline in the economy, but also resulted in a blame game in who was responsible for the tragic event. Two potential issues are to blame, one being on the consumers and companies who saved too much, causing the economy to slow, and the other being the country's aging population or the monetary policy. Another possible reason is how slowly the Bank of Japan responded, which may have made the problem even worse. During this time in Japanese history, the nation faced low growth and deflation, which was a first for everyone. Japan's lost decade is used as an example for other countries to model what not to do during an economic crisis. Some important takeaways from this event is to act quickly to prevent a crisis from evolving. Spending money isn't always the answer, and racking up too much debt will lead to limited upward mobility.
My name is Angela, and I'll be presenting on soft power. So the term was coined by political scientist Joseph Nye to explain the non-traditional ways a country can influence another country's wants or its public values. It is also defined in contrast to hard power like military and economic influence. Japanese visual and popular culture as soft power. Japanese pop culture has become synonymous with soft power because of its widespread and enduring popularity around the world, but especially in the United States. This includes manga, anime, cute characters like Hello Kitty and Pokemon, as well as fashion from the Harajuku neighborhood in Tokyo, made popular in the 2000s by Gwen Stefani. So how soft power works. Professor Nye said that it co-ops, not coerces, meaning that there has to be enough personal buy-in by the people who are involved with it, that it actually, especially with the manga and the anime communities, because of this personal buy-in, it grew through grassroots efforts, mainly early smaller conventions where they passed videos through technology like VCRs and DVDs that were being developed in Japan, and then especially in this decade, in the early 2000s, through the internet. And this caused, snowballed into the otaku generation, and otaku is a Japanese term for people who are involved in a very intense fandom with computers, but also revolving around anime and manga. And these have led to conventions or cons, like Otakon is the largest convention that surrounds anime and manga, and it takes place on the East Coast. And now they're seeing that these conventions that are celebrating a very specific subset of Japanese pop culture are now replacing those cultural ambassadorships that the World's Fairs used to do in the late 19th century. So if you already have an interest in Japanese culture, you may be influenced to go in to look at anime and manga, or if you like anime and manga, you might be more interested and more open to other parts of Japanese culture, whether it be things like more traditional, like taiko, or Japanese food.
Hi everyone, my name is Andrew Ong, and my topic is on the rise of China. So I'm going to start off with a lemon stock, which was made from two brothers that was founded in 1847. Their company was a global financial service. They were the fourth largest investment bank until they went bankrupt in 2008. This resulted in the economic irregularity crisis, which gave China the power to rise up, and this caused China GDP to fall to about 4.5 in 2009. A year later, their employment still going up to 5.3, and this gave China the reason to step up and gain more money. Next slide. How did China rise to power? According to the video I watched, panda diplomacy was one of the reasons. Panda were used as tools for China's economic and political growth. These creatures were sent into 9 different foreign countries: the USA in 1972, the UK 1974, France 1973, the USSR 1957-59, Germany 1974, North Korea 1965 to 1980, Japan 1972, 1980, and 1982, Mexico in 1975. So all in these countries, they are given the pandas into the zoos, and these creatures are taken care of and also being used to develop their growth and money business. Such as the zoos have to pay $1 million per panda that's been sent. So in those 9 countries, then they have to pay loans to China to take care of the pandas and enjoy their training business. And for every panda that has a cub, they have to also include $400,000 per each cub that's been born. And that's not the only reason how they're getting money from. The other reason they're getting money from selling cheap materials sold to other countries, such as toys, plastics, and anything cheaply made. and the Americans are not happy with this. They're saying that this is unfair Chinese practices, because when they buy from them, it's like 20 cents, but when they have to sell it, it's far cheaper than that. And they want to sign a deal with Chinese in January 2020 with Trump to make a deal where, okay, we have a similar prices and we'll share the profits 50-50 or something like that. Next slide. And then how did the rise of China affect the relationship with Japan and America? Well, Americans wanted to maintain their relationship with Japan, but due to China's growth, economic growth, Americans are trying to build an economic relationship with them. And the Japans aren't not happy with that, because ever since the atomic bombing, I mean, since the attack at Pearl Harbor, Hideki Tojo, who was a general at that time, he was like Hitler at that time. He wanted more power. He wanted to impress the emperor. He attacked Pearl Harbor, and this created a war. This made Americans go into World War II, and Roosevelt was the president at that time. And at this point, this made Americans attack Japan, and then we have the atomic bomb. But the Americans got better, and once the relationship was secured, they distanced themselves. While Japan, however, after their economics was improved, their relationship improved, they didn't want to be independent from Americans. And people from the video link below, like Naoki, he wanted people to stand for themselves, be independent again, and to see Trump as that opening. And that's all. And that's why China has effective relationship with Japan and American.
Hello, everyone. My name is Ryan Delorier, and I'll be covering Japan's constitution, specifically their Article 9. And Japan's constitution today was adopted into Japan in 1947. However, it was created by the United States during the United States occupation of Japan following World War II. And in that constitution, there's a specific article, which is Article 9, and it says, aspiring sincerely to an international peace based on justice and order, the Japanese people forever renounce war as a sovereign right of the nation and the threat or the use of force as means of settling international disputes. In order to accomplish the aim of the preceding paragraph, land, sea, and air forces, as well as other war potential, will never be maintained. The right of belligerency of the state will not be recognized. Next slide, please. So what does Article 9 mean? I just read it. There was a lot of words, and the biggest takeaway of it is that Japan is no longer allowed to declare war or invade other countries to settle disputes. Also, they're not allowed to maintain military capabilities and hold weapons that are used for warlike purposes. And so that's a really big takeaway, because how does Japan going to defend itself from foreign invasion? And so the bases that are in Japan from the United States, their ultimate responsibility is to protect the country of Japan from foreign invasion, as well as also form tactical bases to get in the Pacific. So what Japan did during the Korean War, and I believe it was like 1955, was they created the Self-Defense Force, SDF for short. And this was a force that was only stationed in Japan. It was not meant to go outside the country. It's only specific to defending them. And there's been a lot of controversy regarding the Self-Defense Force, because isn't that go against Article 9, which is they have warlike capabilities? And there have been decades of debates since the creation of this Self-Defense Force all the way up until today. And two really big instances that happened. One was right after 2011, 9/11. The U.S. asked Japan for aid in their war against Iraq and Afghanistan. And in 2003, there was Iraq Special Measures Law, which Prime Minister Koizumi passes this legislation that allows the Self-Defense Force to deploy to Iraq to administer only humanitarian relief and aid. So they're not there to fight or combat, the terrorists. But that was the first time that Japanese troops have ever been deployed after World War II. So this was a really big step in the Japanese history, because Article 9 specifically forbids this, even though they are not declaring war. And so on the next slide, we're going to talk about, how they're going to get to that, how make it constitutional. So the SDF has been found constitutional. However, it's still up for debate amongst different parties in Japan and the citizens. And what they want to do, what Prime Minister Abe wants to do in 2007 was he really just wanted to revise it, make it more specific to adhere to what the SDF does. And in order to revise Article 9, or just the Constitution in general, there's Article 96 in Japan's Constitution that specifies how a revision would take place. And it's actually very similar to the United States ability to amend their articles and whatnot. So at two houses in the Diet, there's the upper and the lower for Japan, and 2/3 majority from each house must approve this revision. And as you can look at the picture to the right, it's very similar to the U.S. Standards. However, a majority of voters must agree to this revision, and that calls for a national referendum. And in 2007, Prime Minister Abe, he was able to get it past the Diet, but it was eventually, it was just kind of pushed out from the referendum. They need a majority vote from that. And it was like a 51-49 split. And even though that is a majority, it wasn't a big enough majority to call for a revision of the Article 9. And a big reason why Japan doesn't want to revise Article 9 is they're very fearful that they're will revert back to their old militaristic ways before World War II, and which I can understand is a fear. However, they've taken these extreme measures to not follow that. So I don't see harm in a revision, me personally, but that is Japan as well. And so also Japan's constitution, it remains unamended for roughly the 70 years that it's been created. And if you look over at the United States, that was created in 1788. It's been amended 27 times and has been tried to amend 11,000 times. So I don't know when we will finally get the revision. I know Prime Minister Abe today has been pushing forward a revision, but I believe it did fail at the beginning of this year. I don't know if there'll be another push from him, or if we'll just have to wait until another prime minister comes into power. But yeah, that's Japan's current constitution and the Article 9, dilemma.
Hi, I'm Paul, and I'm covering Pro-Asia. So in 2002, Prime Minister Koizumi Junichiro proposed that Japan start building an East Asian community, an EAC, in order to balance out the rise of China by focusing more on soft power rather than hard power. And he wanted to build the community based on similar values shared by all members, and these values were just so happened to be values that China so opposed. And this basically extended the membership to more more nations other than those like around the Pacific. It extended to India, Australia, and New Zealand. And it's, as I said before, it's just a way to counteract China's growing influence in the whole area. But it seems to be somewhat unsuccessful unless Japan includes China, because China is so powerful. Next slide. In 2009, Japan held a general election for prime minister, and the Democratic Party of Japan, headed by Yukio Hatoyama, won in a landslide election against the ruling Liberal Democratic Party, which had previously ruled almost uninterrupted for about 50 years. And Hatoyama, like, he campaigned on the notion that he would be a lot more assertive in his dealings with the United States. And one of the things he addressed was the issue of the U.S. military base in Okinawa, where he wanted it completely removed, but the U.S. saw that as like their way to keep China in check and to help protect Japan and the rest of Asia. But Hatoyama, he said that this was the U.S. like calling all the shots for Japan, and he kind of wanted to be more make Japan more independent in their dealings. And this kind of scared the United States, because they would have, without Japanese support, they would lose a lot of their influence in Asia. And yeah, they were just really scared, because this meant that with Hatsuyama in power, it would mean less of a focus, or the U.S. would not be like the primary focus of the foreign policy of Japan. They would act more independent now. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you so much for watching our presentation on the first decade of the new millennium in US and Japan relations. These are our bibliography sides, and we hope you enjoyed our presentation.
Good, everyone.